And good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Kelly. I currently serve as the Innovation Program Director at the Minnesota State System Office, and I was the primary grant writer for the grant we submitted to the U.S. Department of Education.
So I introduced myself as an employee of Minnesota State System of Colleges and Universities. So for those of you who aren't familiar, this is a snapshot of who we are and a graphic really showing our reach from tip to toe of the state and a little bit more about that system itself. The unit I have the good fortune to lead aims every day to identify, seed, and support innovative technologies and talent to drive and enable the highest quality teaching and learning experiences for students across Minnesota State. Increasingly, we have embedded within our work attention to equitable and inclusive practices. So you probably aren't surprised that open educational resources have a key area for us to promote cultural fluency and digital accessibility. For those of you who were at the keynote this morning, the echoes of what she shared really felt like we're trying to live that as deeply as we can. So within educational innovations, our commitment to equity was developed collaboratively and iteratively. I'd just like to take a moment to read that commitment out loud, just because I think it's important to, whenever we're in any space, to share that and own it. And that commitment is to serve our diverse communities. We seek to develop skills and strategies to engage in uncomfortable conversations that allow us to acknowledge and incorporate multiple perspectives. In our work, we seek to identify and dismantle barriers based on race, socioeconomic status, gender, religion, sexual orientation, and ability. By using an equity lens and stepping outside our comfort zones, we hope we can address the issues at hand. And one of those issues is a national and state teacher shortage, particularly with our teachers of color. Next slide, Tim. Minnesota State has been building a solid reputation as leaders in open education, promoting open ed and open ed resources for probably 6-7 years. Through that, we're trying to create awareness, developing skills and abilities both across the system and at local campuses. We've essentially been aiming to build a foundation, building readiness to accelerate quickly with an opportunity like the Open Textbook Pilot Grant. While we don't really have time to talk about each of these has grounded our work, that snapshot kind of just shows the breadth of our efforts at the faculty and course level. Hopefully you had a chance to hear learning communities with Karen Pakula earlier on, because that's one of our foundational pieces as well. Next slide, Tim. Additionally, we have a strong base of colleges that have implemented OER or zero cost options at the program level. So we're working both at the course level, at the program level, at the campus level, at the system level. So with great support from the state legislature in 2019-20, we offered 6 colleges and 8 campuses the opportunity to convert an AA degree pathway to one with zero textbook cost, sometimes called a Z degree. 4 began doing so in fall 2020. And again, you won't be surprised to remember that that was not only achieved in less than 12 months, but during the global pandemic. So that was pretty exciting that we were able to make those kind of strides. 2 more fully implemented this past fall. And what you'll see here is just really participating colleges, the progress, and average savings. And we really are excited about the scope of this work and how much more accessible we've made higher ed by making resources more affordable. If you're interested in this work specifically, we'll be sharing more about that on Wednesday at 11 a.m. But mainly I wanted to share that to say that this is a solid foundation for our next challenge. And it is a challenge, but it's an exciting one, and that's opening opportunities for teacher ed. So one last slide for me, Tim. And it's mainly just to say that we think that not only are we seeing some success stories, but we've been telling it, and we're also encouraging all of you to tell your success stories, because it's not about boasting. It's about success being contagious, meaning when our communities, when our faculty, when our students hear about something that has a real and meaningful impact, they're more likely to support it and forward it and keep this momentum of really valuable, purposeful work moving ahead. So with that, I will turn it over, I believe, to Tim.
Thanks, Kim. Appreciate it. So the United States Department of Education awarded Minnesota State a 3-year, $978,332 grant to establish the Opening Opportunities for Teacher Education program. So like all FIPSE awards, unfortunately for 2020, they did reduce our ask. We initially had done a nearly $1.2 million ask. But with that came a little bit of downsizing, but we still think we're going to offer a great opportunity for our students in the teacher education programs. This program will create open textbook and open educational resources for our core teacher education courses that will provide significant savings for students while maintaining and improving student learning outcomes. So why did Minnesota State apply for this grant? So nationally, researchers have projected a teacher shortage of nearly 100,000 qualified teachers. Research has also indicated that there's a deficit that can reach as many as 200,000 by the year 2024, 2025. And of course, worse yet, is that the Survey of Economic Policy Institute in 2020 reported that as many as 20% of teachers indicated they were likely or somewhat likely to leave because of COVID pandemics. In alignment with the national studies, Minnesota teacher shortage is real and the impact can vary by district. The number of students in Minnesota grew by approximately 20,000 from 2015 to 2018 academic years. The discipline shortages in Minnesota can include special education, science, theater, mathematics, world languages, career and tech ed, and bilingual education. Another alarming concern, it's not all doom and gloom, by the way. Another alarming concern is that according to the 2019 teacher supply demand report is that only 3.4% of our active teachers were teachers of color in 2018, but statewide, we have 33.5% of our total student population are of color. So we also discovered a survey of school districts that found 90% of respondents reported difficulty in hiring teachers of color. So in Minnesota, we have a huge opportunity through this grant to address some of those disparities. Research has shown that race-matched teachers to students have shown to benefit students of color through increased reading and math test scores, reduced absences, lower suspension rates, reduced high school dropout rates, and raised college aspirations. These findings are of interest in Minnesota has one of the highest racial achievement gaps in the nation, as shown on the graph here. And research has also shown that teachers of color positively impact all students, but mainly on students of color who continue to experience educational achievement gaps across the country. So under the leadership of Education Innovations at the Minnesota State System Office, a consortium of 6 institutions of higher ed have agreed to assist in the authoring, reviewing, leadership, and piloting of zero-cost teacher education curriculum to support this project. So listed here are the institutions. We're excited to be working with them in close collaboration. So we have 4 primary goals in the redesign of teacher education program curriculum. The first goal is to lower the financial burden of attaining teacher education degree. An example, in 2018, Florida textbook survey found that high school textbook costs led to students not purchasing required textbooks. We've all probably in OER have learned about a lot of these disparities. So for example, 64.2% have not purchased textbooks of some level. 42.8% are taking fewer courses. 35% are earning poor grades, and up to 23% are dropping courses because of textbooks and textbook costs. Economically disadvantaged students of color and students of color, the specific populations that have the greatest benefit of this project, feel these negative impacts. So when completed, we expect to save students between $420,000 and $627,000 per year. And as shared in the opening presentation today, we are actually looking at extending it beyond just cost. We're actually looking at the cultural relevancy and the equity opportunities that we can introduce to this project as well in the teacher education curriculum. We also want to remove, in goal 3, we want to reduce the teacher shortage. Teacher education faculty in Minnesota have further indicated that shortages in greater Minnesota, where attracting teachers to small town areas is challenging. So by addressing goals 1 and 2, we intend to reduce the teacher shortage in Minnesota. We're also going to, in goal 4, increase the cultural fluency of teacher candidates using culturally responsive texts, and that will better prepare them to teach the diverse and multi-ethnic communities in which we serve. So as part of this project, we'll meet the students of the education sector needs through the development of open textbooks or OER in 5 teacher preparation courses identified here. The 6th course we'll be considering in special education is missing from this list. The 6th course is the human relations and multicultural education. We're addressing that if we have budget. If it'll allow us to, we'll go ahead and introduce this in addition to special education to the 6 courses to be developed for this project. Stephen.
Yeah, Tim, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to call an audible. If you would allow me to share my screen, I'll share the presentation on my end. I think it'll just be a little easier for me to advance through the slides, if that's okay.
Sure, certainly.
Is my presentation showing?
Yes, it is, Stephen.
Thank you. All right. So we have a large OER curriculum material development project that we're working on now. The U.S. Department of Education gave us $1 million, and that's a dream come true for many of us who work in the OER space. But we thought a lot about if we had that kind of money and we were going to undertake a project of this magnitude, we really had to have a plan. We knew we were going to be organizing 6 institutions. We knew we were going to be creating either full-on open textbooks or tons of OER and ancillaries to go along with courses to build those out. And we had to get organized, right? So we developed a 12-step process is what we call it. We call it the Open Curriculum Development Workflow, actually. And this builds on a lot of the experience that we've developed over the last several years in educational innovations and in Minnesota State developing OER. I'd like to walk you through each of the 12 steps briefly. We'll do this at a high level. And I'd also, before we do that, like to draw your attention to this graphic that shows the 12 steps, because there's an important component in here that isn't as well acknowledged in the individual steps themselves, and that is the role of our learning circles in the system. Learning circles within Minnesota State have been one of our primary drivers for OER adoption and implementation across the system. And these are professional development activities or circles where faculty or staff or librarians can join the circles for a semester. Sometimes it's 8 weeks, sometimes it's 12 weeks. In the case of our project here, it's going to actually occur over a period of 15 months. And these are places where those involved are able to find camaraderie in the creation of OER and get access to mentors and specialists in OER who can help them with questions they have or help them overcome challenges they're encountering as they work to develop their OER materials. So you'll see that the learning circles themselves in this graphic wrap around 6 of the steps. And so remember how these look as we move through these steps, because these are the periods where within our 12-step process, sort of the meat and potatoes of OER development occurs. And so we try to couch all of those steps within the learning circles to make it a cohesive process for the faculty who are involved. So each of these 12 steps, what happens in each of these 12 steps? Well, the first step that we have is our open inventory. We've actually already completed this in the project. We tapped into the talent of our librarians within Minnesota State, and several of them stepped forward to help us identify all the different kind of OER materials for teacher education that might currently exist in the marketplace. So they did that scrape of the internet. They did that scrape of journals or other places where you might find relevant materials. And we also, throughout that process, asked them to bring to our attention any instances of situations where they might identify some really great curriculum materials that perhaps would be really fit for OER, but at this point in time, maybe they're currently under a copyright license from an individual professor or someone else that has created them and posted them online. We acknowledge that sometimes materials that are created by educators, they don't necessarily understand the copyright ramifications. They might author something and just put it online. In those cases, they might be perfectly willing to put a Creative Commons license on it. So we wanted to be mindful that it's important to reach out in those situations where we can provide that invitation to folks to CC license their work and then make it part of the broader work that we're undertaking right now. Once we've identified all those different kinds of materials that might be available out there in the marketplace, we move on to our open inventory evaluation. This is where we get our faculty involved to actually look at all the materials that we pulled in. And they will then undertake a process to figure out which of these materials we want to continue to kind of keep in the mix in terms of what we're going to use, and which ones, for whatever reason, might not be very well suited for our purposes. Like, for instance, maybe something that was found doesn't fit very well into the 6 courses that we're focusing on. We also are undertaking a teacher education curriculum inventory. And this is about looking at all of the different curriculum materials that exist at our 6 different institutions right now and figuring out who's got the strong ancillaries here, who's got strong material over here, where are opportunities where we can take existing materials created by our faculty and make them open right now so that we can incorporate them into our work that we're doing. In our 4th step, we move on to our OER opportunity analysis. And this is where, having looked at the things that are available in the marketplace, the things that we already have available in our current teacher ed curriculum, where are the gaps? Where are the places where we don't have any good materials that exist that we can make OER, or that are already existing OER, where maybe the only thing that's really good that's available is coming from the publishing end? That represents the areas where we're going to want to focus some of our ancillary work to ensure that we're providing some of these different handouts and ancillary materials that can go along with any open textbooks that we create. In our 5th step, excuse me, we're going to focus on faculty and personnel training. So this again is the OER circles that are wrapped around many of these processes, but we're also going to be engaging in peer mentoring, which can be faculty to faculty, or it can be instructional designer to faculty, because we had the benefit of hiring an instructional designer for this project. And we're also going to be providing the opportunity for all of our faculty who are involved in creating materials to take a publishing short course through our Open Education Network. For those who keep track of what Creative Commons is up to, this is there's a Creative Commons licensing course, and also through the Open Education Network, there's a publishing course. Those two things kind of go hand in hand. So we want to offer those together to our faculty. So they're getting some of that strong Creative Commons background, and they're also getting the publishing background from OEN. In our 6th step, which is the OER curriculum design mentoring, this is where, after faculty have become involved in creating some of their materials, and they've done some of the early work, our instructional designer will work to them to double check some of those designs and do some of the early work before they get really heavy into the curriculum material development. So there again, we want to ensure that not only do the curriculum materials we are creating align to any existing standards within our programs, but we also want to ensure they align to what are called the INTASC standards at the national level. We also in the state of Minnesota have our own teaching standards, which is called PELSB. And so we're also going to be mindful that we may have to create or customize some materials to meet some of those PELSB standards in addition to the INTASC standards. But one of our main goals for this work was to ensure that whatever kind of master materials, if we can even call them those, that we're going to create for OER, that they will be relevant at the national level. And so one of the things that we are careful of is ensuring that the materials we put at the national level aren't so specific that though they meet the needs of Minnesota, they might actually create some headaches for educators at the national level as they have to go through them and try to tease out portions that are good for Minnesota, but may not be good for, say, New York State. In our 7th step in the process, we actually get down to the OER authoring. So we've done some instructional design work, we look through materials, and so our faculty will be authoring over a period of 12 or 15 months. We are going to have them authoring sometimes maybe individually if they take chapters on their own. They're going to be working in groups in certain situations as well. We're really leaving that up to the faculty to figure out how they want to work together individually. We also had the benefit of hiring what we're calling equity coaches as part of our commitment to creating responsive texts, culturally responsive texts, I should say, and throughout the OER that we create. In our 8th step, we have what's called the modular personalized learning step. And what this is it's inspired by a program we had in Minnesota State called FlexPace. And this has to do with leveraging the power of our learning management system to create certain adaptive learning pathways within an online course. And so we'll be taking the OER materials that we have, and our instructional designer during the design process will be figuring out how to work with faculty as subject matter experts to design these adaptive learning modules within the learning management system. We'll be creating specification guides, and this will be really important because the goal is going to be that we can create export packages in SCORM or Common Cartridge out of our learning management system so that others can import them into their learning management system and hopefully have all these plugins set up so they can rapidly put into place their own adaptive learning experience. Now, For those of you who work with LMSs, you know that always doesn't transition as easily as you might hope when you're going from one to the other. So the specification guides will list for faculty or for instructional technologists, whoever is supporting the work, it will tell them how to basically hook up all of the plumbing to have the adaptive experience work in their LMS, like Canvas or Blackboard, for instance. We're a D12 Brightspace system in Minnesota State. We'll also, at this point in time, have ancillaries designed for plug and play customization. So we'll be authoring maybe sometimes an H5P or some other kind of adaptive learning or interactive learning software is what I might say. And so all of this will be included and we'll be ready to go. We plan to offer this through our Opendora repository in Minnesota State, which is where we store all of our OERs. In our 9th step, we have our comprehensive curriculum review. And so after we've created all these materials, we want to ensure that we invite in other professionals in the field, other teacher educators to review the work that we've done. And this is going to be a comprehensive and very structured review process. We will also be inviting educators from outside our system. So if you are a teacher educator and you're interested in becoming part of the review of this curriculum, reach out to us. We would love to have you in looking at these materials and being part of our comprehensive review. So we'll have, again, faculty, industry partners, and we'll be applying a custom rubric that will be courtesy of our instructional designer. And in our last 3 steps, we'll be doing a full-on accessibility review. We will be providing our faculty guidance throughout the curriculum material development process. However, we realize that despite our every efforts, oftentimes we're creating these materials, we oftentimes can miss an important accessibility feature in the things we're creating. And so this step will give us the opportunity to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb and make the revisions necessary to ensure all of our materials are fully accessible. In our 11th step, it's our OER piloting and revision process. We will be piloting these on our campuses with students in the classrooms, and then be kicking them back to the authors for final revisions, so that eventually in our 12th step of the process, we can provide all these materials through Opendora, our OER repository online, Minnesota State. We'll be promoting them throughout our system and through the Open Education Network, and we'll be taking more of this information and word of the materials to conferences, both locally and nationally. At that point in time, everyone here who participates in the Affordability Summit will be able to access materials then too, to use in your own teacher education programs. It was mentioned earlier that if you want to learn more about learning circles, we do have a presentation being provided by some of our colleagues on Thursday at 10 a.m. here at the Affordability Summit. Do highly encourage you to check those out. We didn't touch on learning circles too much here, but I did mention that, again, learning circles is a big part of our professional development project, or process rather, on this project. So with that, are there any questions that anyone has today for our group? I think I would invite you to enable your microphone if you'd like to ask your question, or you can put it in chat. Thank you for that comment, Nancy Ruth.
We would even very much appreciate words of advice if you don't have questions. So it looks like Kathy Brock has a question.
Yeah, I can answer that one. So what's the timeline for the grant? So the grant actually officially started on September 1st of last year. And so we are literally in our 2nd quarter, and it goes all the way through August 30th of 2024. So we have 3 years to get from start to finish, from the development all the way through the review to the piloting to the implementation.
And this is Bob, and I would just like to say to Tim and Stephen and all the Minnesota State folks, we certainly appreciate all of your support over the last several years in the Affordability Summit, and you are a great partner, and we hope that continues well into the future. So thank you for that too.
Yeah, most definitely. Thank you, Bob. All right.
I have a comment if nobody has any more comments. I'm Lori. I'm from Min State. I'm part of the Learning Circles, not this grant, but and with education, but have been involved since the inception of doing Learning Circles. And I think it's pretty rare for a system to take on this much mentorship. The grant obviously was really important, and thank you so much for all the writing for folks and support. But I think that wraparound is allowing faculty to be creative, trusting in the resources, and allowing the resources that they need or even anticipated, like the IT support and the legal support. So I just wanted to mention that as a faculty member.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a fine line where we're acknowledging academic freedom and at the same time providing the support and the expertise from instructional designers, equity coaches, and people like Stephen and project management on top of that. So it's a nice dance, as you will, that we're doing through this process, and we couldn't be more excited. All right, with that being said, if there's no more questions, we can wrap this up. I did put a link to the page for this presentation that you can actually find our slide deck in. But certainly, if you have any other questions, I can go ahead and post my. I think our contact information is also located on that webpage. So don't hesitate to reach out to any three of us. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions that might come up at a later time. And we look forward to presenting this at future conferences. So be on the lookout. Thank you.